This is ThriveCasters,
Thriving, not surviving.
tackling youth issues that matter to you. Welcome to ThriveCasters. I'm Hannah and we've got Waseelah here, and we're going to be talking about how to create a trauma-informed environment. So Waseelah, from your chat with Ben, the head advocate at UNICEF, what did you learn?
He made a lot of really important points. Like, he started off with, looking at it at a basic level, which is just creating kind spaces. So when you're at school, teachers that are kind, creating calm environments and stuff like that. But then it was also, he went on to talk about it at a structural level, which was, how do you use the legal system, the police, the justice systems, and all of its forms, and pretty much everything, and creating like environments and policies that are trauma informed. But it mostly just came down to, using kindness and understanding how trauma affects people.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that there was an emphasis on creating a trauma-informed environment. And so in my own research and listening to that podcast, the highlights were, as you've said, like creating a trauma-informed practice. So just education, so people are aware of how ACEs can affect you in later life and affect the level of trauma you might have. And then the importance of creating a safe environment, which I think I remember us saying before can be quite subjective. Like, what one person might find safe, another might not. Mm-hmm. So I think, some people might find a gang safe, and maybe that's why they've then become attracted to that. But yeah, so a sense of safety, and then with that, a sense of community. So like a sense of belonging with that as well. Can you think of any time that you've been in like a trauma-informed environment?
Exactly. I can't think of anything that was specifically trauma-informed. Like, I think you create your own trauma-informed spaces naturally with the people that you connect with. So for me, when I was in like secondary school and things, I had a very close-knit group of friends, and we all played music together, and we all understood each other as like creatives. But it wasn't necessarily trauma. It was just, this is how we are as good friends, and we support each other in our music, we support each other at school. And at no point do you ever just sort of sit there and ask somebody for their scores and the adverse childhood experience scores. And like, it's just not something that comes up naturally. But the thing with trauma is that it naturally makes people isolated. But because we had such a small, close group of friends, when you see that somebody isn't quite as connected as they are that day, or they're seeming a little bit out of place, and it could be something happened at home, it could be something happened at school, or wherever it is. It's not necessarily like asking and wanting all the information, but making sure that you're always there for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and touches on the importance of like connection, that a trauma-informed environments, obviously in school and like other structured environments, may be more like objective, and they might follow similar rules. But then if you're creating your own trauma-informed environments, like as you just said, the importance of connection and talking, like I think that, so say if somebody was less talkative one day or wasn't really themselves, that maybe, say if you thought, oh, I'm going to ask them how they are, if there's anything up, you could then have a conversation that's actually really healing to them and allowing them to process their feelings. If they were just on their own, in isolation, they would not have that processing. And that is something that I've really, really learned. Honestly, it's just since we've been going over this topic. I think before this, I mean, obviously I knew how important it was to kind of like have friendships and stuff, but I definitely did not realise how important other people are in your own lives, especially with coronavirus happening at the moment. It's so important to have strong relationships where you trust people. Yeah. So I think, like, I don't know about you, but do you feel definitely more of a sense of community when there's a lot of trust within that connection?
Yeah. And I think it's something, especially as musicians, like a lot of my friends are creatives and artists in one way or another. So when like if I finish a piece of music, or like, somebody finishes a painting or something, and then you share it, there is an absolute trust there that, you know, you're putting all of yourself into this work, and then you send it to somebody and you hope that they understand, or even if they don't understand, or if it's something that's wild, outrageous, insulting, painful, that it's respected, and then you can have a conversation about it if you want to. Or
Yeah.
I think the best one actually is like I finished a piece recently and I sent it to a friend, and they said, I was like, I understand what it is that you're feeling and what you're trying to do here, but I know that you can create more, and there is more of you to share about yourself in this piece. And it's things like that that as a musician especially is what you need, and it's what I love about the little community that I have.
Definitely. I think as well, like when you do share something that you do with the community that you have, it if you know that you're going to share it, you may then put more effort into it, and it then might feel more worthwhile, and you might feel like you have more of a point, rather than if you're just creating something on your own, and you're not, like, you know that nobody's ever going to hear it, and that it's just yours. Obviously, there is something special in that, but I think if you did that your whole life, for a lot of people, I know if it was me, for example, it would be way more difficult to motivate myself to keep doing it. And as like high ACEs correlate with high anxiety and depression, I think, as we were discussing earlier, like a big prominent part of depression is like lack of meaning or lack of purpose. And I think community really, really builds that lack of purpose that can really help people who are healing from ACEs. So if we were going to give advice to people at home, like at the coronavirus, like with the coronavirus at the moment, how to build their own little trauma-informed environment, what do you reckon we would suggest?
I would say that, I say this as a musician, and like I dabble in like photography and other things. I would say that sharing like directly on social media, like especially if you have like a few hundred followers and they're not people that you directly know, sharing like that isn't the way to do it, because you then end up you're sharing this big part of you, but the responses that you're getting from people are not necessarily always positive, and it's just in numbers, and it's not supportive, and it doesn't nurture you in the same way.
Yeah.
But a really cool thing that you can do is, like, say if you've painted a picture or something, like you can take photos of it, but send it to friends and family directly. And I like to put little captions and things on mine, or like say this is about this, or I sometimes write a blog piece with it and I send all of it to somebody. And then you spend a little bit of time actually talking about it, talking about not necessarily all the details of the story or whatever it is, but like nurturing it and feeling safe now that you have shared it. Because I always find that when I share stuff on the internet, it actually feels very hostile.
Definitely. That is, like, honestly such amazing advice. Like, I've never even thought about it like that, because at the end of the day, you do have a sense of an online community with Instagram, etc. But that's definitely not the same as having like an immediate community. So your own like connections and bonds you've grown with people that are in your little community. If you shared it amongst that, or even, I know this goes back to being on social media, but say if you have like a group chat with your really close friends, say if you put it on there, or like you said, like sending it to people individual, just anything that you've done, that will definitely then create that sense of community, which is really, really strong and keep everyone together.
Exactly. And I think with social media especially, so we have all of these conversations about not being ashamed of mental health and not being ashamed of all of these things, but there's one thing of sort of telling people that you have a mental health issue, or telling people that you are struggling with something, but you need somebody to reciprocate it. You need it coming back. And social media like rarely offers that space. having somebody comment on your picture or comment in on anything, it's not the same as when you have a nurturing conversation with somebody about it.
Yeah. And as well, you might not necessarily feel like you trust someone that you don't really know. I mean, I know there's people out there that may not necessarily have any healthy bonds with people. And that could then actually be a help to them to then grow a bond with someone online. But I think that it all the same, if you can build a connection, whether it is online or whether it isn't, connection at the moment is completely compulsory in order to build a trauma informed environment for yourself, as well. I'd also say anybody out there that is interested in ACEs or is interested in adverse childhood events and trauma, just to educate yourself, like look online as much as you can and see how they do link and how that might relate to you, and then like talk to a close friend about it. So it's just something to process, and then just practice everything you can for good mental health. So like eat well, sleep, exercise, etc. Because for me personally, a safe environment is knowing that I have space or opportunity to exercise, that I have access to good, like healthy food, that I'm able to sleep like 8 hours, that I'm not going to be in heavy confrontation, that I have space where I know it's mine and that I can relax and not be on edge all the time. That's what a safe environment means for me. And then building a community is just staying in touch with everyone, especially via Skype. And then I think as well, even for me, informing myself of ACEs and trauma and how the importance of connection is already quite enlightening for me. I don't know how it has been for you.
Yeah, no, it really has been. It's really interesting that, like, especially because some things are so common. Like, if we consider that living with somebody who has a mental health problem, that is one of the questions on the adverse childhood experiences tests and quizzes. Like, if living with somebody who has a mental health issue, and when you think about how common that is, and it's becoming, when we look at the way we're thinking now as a generation, that everybody is talking about some or other experience of mental health, not necessarily as serious enough for it to be considered to be ACEs. But we didn't, like, when we were younger, we didn't ever look at it like that. It was just something that we carry and we don't heal from it. But there's something about addressing it, and almost like when you can put a label on something and say that, like, this is a symptom, then you can search for the cure. You know what to Google. But without that, like, when we were younger, we didn't know what to Google. We didn't have, like, we weren't able to say this is what it is. And then, there's a lot more research coming up about adverse childhood experiences and trauma and trauma-informed environments and counselling and stuff like this that we can access online and we can access through the NHS and things like that. So we know what it is and how to move on and how to cope with it, rather than there's these blanket terms that we developed of just mental health or just anxiety. There's a lot more to it.
I think as well, like, informing yourself of like trauma and ACEs shows you that there is another way to deal with it and process it all, rather than just burying it down. And I think that's what a lot of people tend to do, and I've done it in the past, is just bury any feelings of sadness, not try and understand them, but bury them down, and then just get so distracted in everyday life, like whether I'm working, whether I'm trying to achieve something, whether I'm thinking about, like, whether I'm going and having a drink at the pub, or anybody that like participates in unhealthy habits like smoking, drinking, drugs, whatever. There is another way to process trauma, and it's through literally doing this and through
exactly
actually getting help.
But I think it's also, like, really important, when we were saying trauma-informed environments, the people that you're around are really important in that. And
Yeah.
when you don't really understand what it is that's making you behave the way that you are, and then there can be people around you, or even in yourself, where you just say, oh, I'm being crazy, I feel crazy, I feel insane, and you're out of control, and you can't understand it. Understanding ACEs, understanding trauma and how it affects you, even if it's not something that would be considered to be a large trauma and an adverse childhood experience, but trauma happens in all sorts of ways, and it happens throughout your life. And being able to sit there and actually understand that the reason why I feel like this is because of this, and the reason why I'm behaving like this is because of that, and how it is that you can go through and you can change that, you can be healthy again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially about the fact that these ACEs can actually happen all throughout your life. So it's not even just isolated to childhood. So say if it's happened in your teens, your young adult life, or even just in the future, just whenever in your life, it's still important to know.
Exactly. So you and I have been looking at attachment theory and things, and how your attachment style, the way that you connect with people, changes throughout your life depending on who you've been around and the way that they affect you. And that includes, being in relationships as adults, the people that your boyfriends, your girlfriends, the people that you get married to, and how they change the way that you approach people. And that's important. It's another one of those things that once you understand the way that you connect with people, you choose better people to connect with, and people who nurture you, and people who can give you security, people who can bring out the best in you, which is what all of this is about. It's about how to, as what ThriveCasters is about, thriving. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to wrap up on. And the main things to take away from this is the importance of connection, healthy relationships, safe environment, building community, and trauma-informed practices. Thank you for listening,
and join us next time.
Don't forget to follow us on social media on @PointWM and #ThriveCasters. Join us next time for more conversations that matter to you.